Sandy's usually used as a track maintenance vehicle. She could sometimes be found on station pilot duties at the big station, arranging trains for the other engines. Sometimes, while handling the single-axle coaching stock, Sandy can't help but feel like the bigger engines aren't suited to pull them. Most of the single-axle coaches knew she wasn't being rude, but not all of them.
You need to understand how to handle coaches properly.
A coach said to Sandy one morning as she was arranging them for Henry's stopping service.
I'm sorry, come again?
"Asked Sandy,"
Oh, don't play dumb with us.
said another coach.
We know you despise coaches like us. Oh, but the same, I don't like you.
Said Sandy.
I just think you look weird with the bigger engines. Specifically the tender engines and mainline diesels. Oh, what do you know?
Asked another coach.
You're just a boring little track maintenance vehicle.
The other coaches laughed at this. Sandy felt hurt. That evening, Sandy was telling Kana about what was on her mind and what the coaches had said.
I mean, think about it. You run on bogies. The single-axle stock doesn't. Which is why I feel like you should only pull the bogie carriages. I can understand that. But I don't mind pulling the single-axle coaches. I know to treat them with care since most of them aren't suited for mainline work anymore. I personally just think they look weird behind you and the other big engines.
Said Sandy.
Don't say that too loudly.
Said Rebecca as she pulled up alongside the two female diesels.
He may be listening. Who may be listening?
Asked Sandy.
We're the only locals here. Well,
Said Rebecca.
there was once an engine who didn't like single-axle carriages at all. There was?
Asked Sandy.
Yes.
Said Rebecca.
Kana would soon come back to bite him in the tender tank.
Sandy and Kana listened hard as Rebecca told her story.
And it's rumored that on certain nights,
Just after midnight, the sound of an engine puffing past with one coach in tow can be heard. A flash of red can be seen, and then in the blink of an eye, the engine is gone into the night. Gone. Without a trace.
thus the legend was born as the wandering coach.
Rebecca finished. Sandy and Kana were surprised.
I'd take care if I were you.
Said Rebecca as she headed off for the sheds.
He could be anywhere.
The two female diesels soon followed the bullied Pacific to the sheds. Sandy rolled into the sidings outside the sheds. She was still thinking about what Rebecca had told her and Kana.
It's can't be true. Can it?
She asked herself. She didn't have time to think about it, and soon went to sleep. Darkness soon fell across Sodor. The yards were very quiet. Sandy was sleeping soundly amongst the other engines in the main sheds. Suddenly, an owl landed on Sandy and hooted loudly, waking her with a start.
Oh, you stupid bird!
She grumbled. The owl obviously didn't answer. Sandy looked over to the other sidings. Looking past some flat wagons, she saw a single-axle coach behind a bogie coach. and behind them was a cattle van. Sandy looked over at the cattle van, then back at the coaches. She'd heard of how Sir Handel used to refer to the single-axle coaching stock of the Skarloey Railway as cattle trucks.
Why would you refer to coaches as cattle trucks?
Sandy muttered.
Sorry, single coach, nothing personal. Although carriages like you do look strange with the bigger engines. There's not much I can do about it. You're real coaches, even if you don't look like it.
I was about to say the same thing. Sandy jumped at the sound of the voice. She looked over to the line next to her. Backing down towards her was a large, red tender engine pushing a single carriage. This engine didn't have a number on its cab or tender, just the letters LNWR on the latter. The coach had 2 axles and was painted cream and green, like many of the express coaches. As the engine slowed to a stop, it looked down at Sandy. Both loco and coach were heavily weathered. Sandy was shocked.
This railway takes good care of its engines. What about you, mate?
She asked herself. Carriages come in many forms, little one, said the red engine. You wouldn't like me calling you a child, would you?
Oh, you're calling a child?
Sandy snapped.
I'm not a bloody child!
Well, judging from what I've heard about you, you're too childish to be a proper engine like me, said the engine rudely. This made Sandy cross.
I am a proper engine!
She shouted.
I may be on track maintenance duties most of the time, but I have been shunted across the island's yards once in a while.
There was a moment of silence. Then, the big red engine laughed. A track maintenance vehicle? You poor thing. You don't know how to handle coaches properly.
Well, I do personally think big locos like you look weird with small coaches like the one behind you.
The big engine's laughter was replaced by a frowning look. You... what? He asked.
It's my personal opinion on the topic itself,
said Sandy.
although I know there isn't much I can do about it. And before you ask, no, I've not bumped any of them.
Good to hear, said the red engine, sounding slightly happier. Coaches are to be respected, only bumped when they themselves misbehave and are awkward during passenger runs. Mistreat your coaches without reason, and they'll mistreat you.
What do you mean by that?
Asked Sandy.
I never thought coaches would act like trucks.
There's more to the story than your friend is letting on, said the engine, smirking slightly.
Wait, what?
Asked Sandy. It's just something I've heard over the years. Besides, it's too late for story time. Controversial engines like you wouldn't even care if I told you. Sandy was curious.
Now you've got me intrigued, mate.
She said, I guess I could tell you a story that your streamlined friends...
One of them isn't really streamlined because she has a flat front.
Interrupted Sandy. The engine stared coldly at the small diesel. Whatever, he murmured. Now tuck yourself in, young child. This is a story you'll want to tell your friends over and over again. Sandy hated being called a child, but she didn't want to argue with her strange guest. Sandy listened as the engine told the story, but something was different about his telling of it. He seemed to go into more detail than Rebecca, sharing facts Sandy had never heard before. Details Rebecca must have missed out on. By the time the big red engine had finished, Sandy was speechless. The engine looked back at Sandy as if he was asking her for some feedback. At last, the track maintenance vehicle found her voice.
That's horrifying.
She said nervously.
I'm not saying you're making it up, but I have to ask. Since when do coaches randomly appear on trains? That's never really happened before.
The engine was looking up at the sky. He didn't respond to Sandy for a moment.
Do some stargazing.
Asked Sandy, trying to change to a more happy topic.
Look, there's the Big Dipper.
The engine looked back down at Sandy. Take my advice, little one, he said sternly. Treat your coaches with respect. They don't take kindly to being mistreated. They have their own ways of getting even with those who despise them. Besides, a simple matter such as death won't offer protection from retribution.
Well, thanks for that story.
Said Sandy, trying to be kind.
It's getting late. I should get some sleep. You should too, mister. It must have been a long day for you.
I have a name, you know, you controversial bug.
What is it then?
Asked Sandy, who was starting to shut her eyes. Just as soon as she was about to fall asleep, the loco answered.
Afton.
Sandy's eyes snapped open.
Wait, what? No, it can't be.
Before Sandy could finish her sentence, the carriage creaked loudly. The red engine, Afton, gave a long, deep sigh. I've rested long enough. I must be going. We must keep time, you know. Sandy didn't respond. She was too busy staring at the massive red locomotive. Then, Afton hissed steam and slowly puffed out of the sidings, the carriage creaking and groaning as it was dragged behind them. Soon, they vanished beyond Sandy's line of vision and were gone. Sandy felt very uneasy and hardly slept that night. Due to her lack of sleep, Sandy found it hard waking up the next morning. She was still in shock over the more detailed story the big red engine had told her. The coaches noticed the look on her face when she went to fetch them for the first services of the day.
What's got you so startled?
Asked the brake coach. Sandy was hesitant. She didn't want to tell the coaches in case they made fun of her, but knew that if she didn't tell them, they wouldn't be able to help her. By the time she'd moved the coaches to the station, they were speechless. It didn't take long for James to arrive. He looked over to see a rather feared expression on Sandy's face. "The hell's wrong with you?" asked James. Sandy didn't answer. She was looking at the coach behind James's tender. She felt as if he was the bigger red engine she'd seen last night, but with more carriages.
It's nothing, James.
She said hastily. Knowing that Sandy was still trying to wake up, James respectfully puffed away. Gordon eventually left with the express, and Sandy was starting to arrange a goods train for Rebecca. As she added some more trucks onto the consist, Kana arrived.
You look rather sleepy, Sandy.
She said,
Something wrong? I feel more scared than sleepy.
said Sandy, and she explained to Kana what she'd seen last night.
I've never heard of this Afton bloke before. But from what you've told me, his account of the story sounds similar to what Rebecca told us.
Kana trailed off. Sandy looked at the bullet engine.
Something wrong?
She asked.
Henry's arriving with a return stopping service.
Said Kana.
How about I arrange Rebecca's train while you wait for him? Oh, thank you.
Said Sandy, and headed for the station. Rebecca soon left with her train after Kana had arranged the rest of it. Sandy watched as the yellow bullied Pacific pulled out of the yards towards the main line. When Rebecca's brake van cleared the sidings, she saw a trio of old coaches sticking out of the carriage sheds. Then, she thought back to what Rebecca had told her and Kana. She then remembered what Kana had told her earlier. And then, she thought of what the big red locomotive had told her last night. A sudden chill ran down her bodywork as it became clear. Many said Afton hadn't been around for years, but yet, Sandy had seen him. But how had she seen him? Was he really there? Was he perhaps a dream the whole time? Henry soon arrived with the return stopper, and Sandy set to work moving the coaches without saying a word. Sandy is a different engine now. Though she still finds it weird the bigger engines are pulling the smaller coaches, she's never let the topic come out of her mouth again. The others have decided to just drop it and put it in the past. And if any of you have heard of Afton's tale before, you probably know what to expect when you hear him or physically see him.